the third heaven. Rising from the darkness of the second heaven, Enoch was then taken to the third heaven, which presented a dramatic contrast that must have been overwhelming to his senses. After the oppressive gloom of the prison realm, the sudden explosion of beauty, light, and sweet fragrances would have been almost intoxicating. Here, looking downward, he beheld a place of unimaginable beauty and goodness, a realm of perfect harmony and abundance that exceeded even the most idyllic earthly paradise. The third heaven opened before Enoch as a vast landscape of perfect proportion and design, its topography forming patterns too perfect to be natural, yet too organic to be artificial. Rolling hills covered in lush vegetation gave way to meadows carpeted with flowers of unearthly beauty. Crystal streams meandered through verdant valleys, their waters so pure they seemed to glow with an inner light. The very air was different here, clearer, more vital, charged with a life-giving quality that energized Enoch's being with each breath. This celestial realm was filled with flowering trees bearing sweet-smelling fruits unlike anything found on earth. Their trunks might have been perfectly symmetrical, their bark possessed of intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories in a language of divine artistry. Their branches reached upward in gestures of perpetual praise, leaves shimmering with metallic hues that caught and reflected the ambient light in dazzling displays. The fruits growing on these trees defied categorization, neither exactly like apples nor pomegranates, nor any earthly produce, but possessing qualities of all excellent fruits combined and enhanced. The food produced in this realm bubbled with fragrant exhalation, a sensory experience beyond earthly comparison. These weren't passive fruits, but active producers of blessing, continuously releasing aromas that nourished the spirit as their substance would nourish the body. To stand near these trees was to be enveloped in clouds of sweet-smelling mist that cleared the mind and elevated the spirit, each different tree producing its unique fragrance that complemented rather than competed with those around it. But most remarkable of all, in the midst of this paradise, stood the trees of life, the very place where, according to Enoch, the Lord rests when he ascends into paradise. These weren't merely exceptional specimens of the surrounding vegetation, but unique creations of an altogether different order. They would have towered above the other trees, their presence dominating the landscape, serving as the focal point around which everything else seemed to be organized. The tree of life was described as having ineffable goodness and fragrance, adorned more gloriously than any other existing thing. In appearance, it resembled gold and vermilion, with a fire-like quality, bearing every kind of fruit imaginable and some beyond imagination. Its trunk might have gleamed with a metallic luster, not dead metal, but living material that pulsed with vitality. Its branches would have extended in perfect symmetry, each one balanced with its counterpart, creating an architectural marvel that no human designer could replicate. The leaves of this extraordinary tree would have shimmered with colors that shifted as Enoch observed them, sometimes appearing golden, sometimes ruby red, sometimes with the intensity of flame, yet never consumed. Each leaf would have been perfect in form, without spot or blemish, radiating a subtle light that contributed to the ambient illumination of the entire paradise. And hanging from its branches were fruits of every conceivable variety, all simultaneously ripe and perfect, their colors creating a tapestry of beauty that captivated the eye. The roots of this magnificent tree extended to the garden at Earth's end, positioned between the realm of corruptibility and incorruptibility. This description suggests that the tree of life serves as a bridge or connection point between different orders of existence, between the temporary and the eternal, the changeable and the immutable. Its roots literally anchored heaven to earth, creating a conduit through which divine life could flow into the lower realms of creation. From this location, two springs emerged, one producing honey and milk, the other oil and wine. These weren't merely symbolic, but actual flowing substances, each with its own channel and course. The honey would have been golden and translucent, the milk pure white and perfect in composition. The oil would have possessed a golden-green luminescence, the wine a deep ruby clarity without any impurity. These four streams flowed with a quiet course around paradise before descending to Eden, creating a connection between heavenly paradise and its earthly counterpart. This reference to Eden suggests a profound cosmological understanding that the Garden of Eden described in Genesis wasn't merely an earthly location, but had a heavenly counterpart or source. The paradise that humans briefly experienced before the fall was a projection or extension of this third heaven, the four rivers of Eden, Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, being earthly manifestations of these heavenly streams of milk, honey, oil, and wine. Every tree in this realm bore fruit. Not a single one was barren or merely ornamental. This perfect fertility reflected the fundamental nature of the third heaven as a place of abundant life and blessing, where sterility and emptiness had no place. The fruits weren't seasonal but perpetual, never fading or falling to the ground to decay, but maintaining their perfect ripeness indefinitely, ready to be harvested when needed. 300 exceptionally bright angels kept watch over this garden, their appearance surpassing even the typical angelic glory. These guardians weren't present to prevent access, as the cherubim guarding Eden after the fall, but to tend and maintain this perfect environment. They moved among the trees with practiced efficiency, their tasks synchronized in a choreography of caretaking that had been perfected over eons. Some might have tended to the trees, others monitored the four streams, while others maintained the perfect climate and conditions of paradise. These guardian angels sang sweetly without ceasing, serving the Lord throughout all days and hours. Their songs weren't repetitive or monotonous, but infinitely varied expressions of praise, their voices blending in harmonies beyond human musical understanding. This perpetual worship created a sonic environment as perfect as the visual and olfactory aspects of the paradise, completing its sensory perfection. However, the third heaven contained a stark duality that challenged Enoch's understanding. When his guides led him to its northern region, he encountered a place of terrible torment, a realm of darkness, fiery rivers, cruel frost, and merciless angels bearing fearsome weapons. This section of the third heaven stood in shocking contrast to the paradise he had just witnessed, its environment as hostile and threatening as the other was welcoming and nurturing. The northern region was characterized by cruel darkness and unilluminated gloom, not merely the absence of light, but an active darkness that seemed to repel any illumination. Within this darkness burned murky fire constantly flaming aloft. Not the pure, illuminating fire of divine presence, but a smoky, contaminated flame that produced heat without healthy light. A fiery river coursed through this region, its banks lined with instruments of punishment. The climate of this region was one of extremes, areas of intense heat adjacent to zones of bitter cold, creating an environment of perpetual discomfort where adaptation was impossible. Thirst and shivering affected all who dwelt there with no means of relief available. The angels who administered this region were described as fearful and merciless, bearing angry weapons for the implementation of merciless torture. Unlike the weeping guardians of the second heaven, these angels performed their punitive duties without apparent sorrow or hesitation. When Enoch expressed his horror at this place, saying, "Woe, woe, how very terrible is this place," his guides explained that this section was prepared for those who dishonor God on earth, those who practice unnatural sin, engage in sorcery, steal, lie, commit murder, oppress the poor, and worship idols. This lengthy catalog of offenses suggests that this region serves as a place of punishment for a wide spectrum of moral failures, particularly those that harm others or corrupt the divine order. Unlike the second heaven, which held rebellious angels, this place of punishment was designated for human souls who had lived in opposition to divine principles. The specificity of the offenses mentioned suggests a belief in proportional justice, that particular types of sin would receive particular forms of punishment, each one appropriately calibrated to the offense committed. Particularly emphasized were sins of child corruption, after the sodomitical fashion, magic-making, enchantments, and devilish witchcrafts, suggesting that offenses against children and attempts to manipulate spiritual forces for selfish ends were considered especially serious. Also highlighted were economic injustices, who seeing the poor take away their goods and themselves wax rich, injuring them for other men's goods, indicating that exploitation of the vulnerable carried severe consequences in the cosmic justice system. The third heaven, therefore, appears to serve a dual purpose. It contains both paradise, likely the Garden of Eden that was taken up from earth, and a place of punishment for the wicked. It represents both the reward of the righteous and the judgment of the sinful, establishing a cosmic principle that each soul ultimately experiences an environment that corresponds to its inner moral reality. The stunning contrast between these sections would have impressed upon Enoch the absolute nature of moral choice, that virtuous living and wickedness lead to radically different destinations.